Okay. All right. Hey everyone again. Thanks for joining. My name is Simran and I'm the Canopy. Canopy is a co-working space that's based in San Francisco. And today we've got Kim Kolt of For Good Ventures joining us today again. I love all the series that we've put together so far. And she's going to be moderating a great discussion on sustainable design and sustainable fashion with the leaders using the technologies in the forefront of making the industry clean and green. We're going to be opening this up to Q&A at the end. And now I'm going to hand this over to Kim, who is going to introduce everybody. All right, Kim, all you.
Thank you. Thank you again for having us. We're really excited to speak with you today. We have a really exciting panel. I'm going to jump into the introductions, and hopefully this will be a dynamic panel between all of us. So, and feel free to ask questions along the way as well, and we can see those in the chat on the side. First, we have Andras Forgacs. He is co-founder and CEO of Modern Meadow. He is a serial entrepreneur in deep tech and life sciences. He's leading the company into a new age of biofabrication to transform the material world by unlocking the power of nature. Andras is also a co-founder of a 3D bioprinting company, or Organovo. Previously, he held positions with an international technology-focused venture fund, McKinsey & Co., and Citigroup. Andras also is founding chairman of the international nonprofit Resolution Project and was a Kauffman Fellow with the Center for Venture Education. He holds an MBA from the Wharton School and a Bachelor of Arts with honors from Harvard University. He's named as a 2018 Tech Pioneer by the World Economic Forum. Modern Meadow has created a novel platform of biofabricated materials at the forefront of biotechnology and partners with some of the world's most thought-leading brands to offer design that contributes to a healthier planet. Next up, we have Louis Perkins. Louis's passion for sustainability and nonprofit work has included strategic roles with organizations such as the Clean Air Campaign, 360i, US Web, CKS. He is an Ashoka and CNA Foundation strategy thought partner for social entrepreneurs, 2016-2017 member of the H&M Global Challenge Award expert panel, and a design mentor for both the Council of Fashion Designers of American Lexus Design Initiative, Eco Design Challenge Accelerator, as well as the IDEO and Ellen MacArthur Foundation's New Plastics Economy Circular Design Competition. Perkins has also been a participant in the World Economic Forum's Global Future Council on Consumption. Perkins holds an MBA in marketing and strategy with a focus on social responsibility from Emory University and a Bachelor of Arts from Washington Lee University. In 2018, he was recognized by his undergraduate alma mater with the Distinguished Alumni Award. Incredibly impressive, both of you. Next, we have Stacy. Stacy Flynn is CEO and a founding partner of Evrnu, a textile innovations company. She's an accomplished sustainable systems expert and committed to developing innovative fiber technologies that reduce textile waste and preserve natural resources. Stacy is also an Unreasonable Impact Fellow, a TEDx and sought after keynote speaker. She has earned numerous regional and global awards for entrepreneurship and impact. She has a bachelor's in science degree in textile development and marketing from the Fashion Institute of Technology and an MBA in sustainable systems from Bainbridge Graduate Institute, which is now called the Presidio Graduate School. Under Stacy's leadership, Evrnu, which is a certified B Corp and social purpose corp, is working to solve the most pressing challenges facing the global textile and apparel industry. In 2019, Evrnu debuted New Cycle, a technology that transforms garment waste into high quality, renewable resources. Evrnu owns and operates several labs and pilot facilities across North America and is expanding into recoverable stretch, recoverable polyester, and the separation of all blended materials that are used in apparel. And last, I have Michelle Zhu, Prior to founding Huue, Michelle Zhu got her training as a business generalist, working in strategy consulting at Deloitte, as well as business operations at Yelp, but was ultimately inspired to start the company based on what she observed from her family's apparel business growing up. Also, she's the CEO and co-founder of Huue, and a little bit on Huue is it's a biotechnology company creating the world's most sustainable dyes for the industries that are shaping the future of Earth, starting with the indigo in your jeans. Its mission is to, like this, I guess. This mission is to basically minimize the amount of toxic chemicals used in the dye production and application process. As the sole non-technical member of the C-Stage company, Michelle manages all aspects of Hue's operations, fundraising, and sales efforts. Wow. Thank you all for joining. So let's begin with a little bit, since we have your backgrounds, it'd be great to learn a little bit about why each of you got into sustainable fashion and what it has been like becoming a leader in this space. Andras, I'm going to start with you.
Okay, thanks, Kim, and great to be here with this great group. So I've had I grew up in a family of scientists, and kind of science was the dinner table topic, right, in my family. So I've had a long-standing interest in that field, and I even in school, you know, when I was in high school, I was quite the nerd. I worked in science labs during the summer and was convinced I was going to be a scientist. Then I went off to college, and I jokingly say I kind of fell into the wrong crowd. I ended up, you know, I was at a liberal arts university. I just got so interested in so many other fields, and you know, graduated and went into business, the world of business. So for me, you know, sustainable fashion, or more to the point, sustainability-driven technologies have been a real way of taking my interest in science, and I've had a long-standing interest in also environmental issues, and merging them with the engine of business innovation, right? Because business is really a way to get solutions to scale and to have impact. And I've had a career across, you know, many different forms of business, in finance and consulting, and starting, you know, multiple companies. But it's always been I've always been interested in innovation. I've always been interested in kind of global issues in the commons, and like the environment. And for me, you know, that's been, you know, with Modern Meadow, it's really a confluence of all the things I really care about. I have to say, the fashion side is something I care about, but I'm not, you know, I would say I'm much more concerned about sustainability and the choices that consumers can make around sustainability. Because at the end of the day, any impact that we hope to have needs to be adopted, and it needs to be easy to adopt by the consumer. I would say, you know, the fashion side of this is really, I have a lot of respect for design innovation, and fashion can be an incredible tone setter, right? To be able to shape the desire of consumers, but it is ultimately about being able to get consumers to adopt change, to be able to make choices available at scale.
And can I stick with you for just 1 minute? Could you tell us a little bit about why did you look at coming up with an alternative to leather?
Yeah, so, you know, when I studied leather design in college, I'm just kidding. I had no expectation that I would end up in, you know, developing or working in a team that's developing an alternative to leather. It really came because I had started up another company that was pioneering a form of biofabrication for medical applications, and that was the 3D bioprinting company that you mentioned, Organovo. And in the course of growing Organova, we really got to go really deep into biofabrication and the structures you can build with biology for a medical purpose. And, later, I had a chance to go live in China, and I was working as a venture investor there. And I just saw that there was a booming economy there, a booming consumer market. But unfortunately, the negative side effect of that was that there was a lot of pollution. And I felt that in my daily life. My wife was, living with me. We both felt it. And we were just concerned about how is it that you can reconcile, consumer growth with environmental impact. And I was thinking in the back of my mind, well, gosh, we have a little bit of insight on this space called biofabrication. Is there a way for us to apply some of those principles to rethink how everyday consumer items are made? And with Organova, we developed ways of making skin that L'Oreal was using to test and develop new cosmetics. We developed ways of making little tissues and organs that could be used by, that were used by other pharmaceutical companies to test and develop new drugs. And it wasn't a crazy idea for us to think about, well, if we can make skin, can we make leather, right? And that was the genesis of the idea behind Modern Meadow. Now, years later, we've actually developed technologies that have gone very, very far afield from what we were practicing then. But the instinct came there. It was started by an insight around a set of technologies broadly under biofabrication and looking at opportunities for them to have impact beyond medicine. And the biggest opportunity the biggest unmet need that I felt that I could pursue was how to move the consumer to be able to make better choices so that we can have a better impact on the environment and the planet.
Wonderful. Stacy, could you please tell us a little bit about your journey becoming a leader in impact and Evrnu?
Sure. Yeah. I think I fell into entrepreneurship. I didn't choose to become an entrepreneur. I was working in textiles and apparel for probably close to 20 years. I started my career at DuPont. Then I moved to Target, and I started Target's raw materials division. And then Eddie Bauer moved me to the West Coast, where I managed the development of their denim businesses. In 2010, I started working for a startup in Seattle making clothes out of recycled plastic waste. And I started to get really excited about what could be done with, the concept of shape-shifting materials. And at that time, you could buy polar fleece and other kinds of fabrics, but I wanted to know, can I make a men's 100 doubles dress shirt? Would a man even know it was made from waste? And then I started to get really excited about the potential of actually taking that product back and breaking it down, depolymerizing it, and doing it again. So that's where all of this got kicked off. This company I was working for sent me to China, and I had a really similar experience to you, Andras. I went into the subcontracted areas of China in 2010 for the first time, and I saw the impact of how our industry is treating the environment and how we get to low price. I didn't really realize how much of the subcontracting takes place and what that impact actually is to the environment and how people are living as a result of the way we make textiles. So, I began on this 1 month trip, began adding up how many millions of yards of fabric I had made up to this point in my career, and all of a sudden became linked to the cause of the problem. So I decided that is not how the story ends, and decided to go back and get an MBA and start studying the problem.
Wow. It's amazing.
Yeah.
And Evrnu was the solution.
Yeah. So we, in grad school, I had realized like 90% of all clothing is either made from polyester or cotton. Both fibers require tremendous amounts of natural resources, roughly 700 gallons of water to make one t-shirt. And then as subject matter experts, we take these fibers and we spin them into yarn, and we basically make clothing and distribute to every human on the planet. And worldwide, we're throwing away about 50 million tons of garment waste away every year. So we knew that if there was a way to take that waste and depolymerize it and turn it into new fiber, it was the linchpin of impact for the system. It would allow our industry to grow, but grow on a fraction of the natural resources required for conventional product creation. So that's how we got kicked off. And my first prototype back in 2014, we took a t-shirt from a solid to a liquid and back to a solid with a syringe. And I, put these samples in 3 beakers. And Louis, you'll remember this because you were one of the guys who I approached at this time. But I basically went to every brand or retailer, including my old bosses at Target. And I told them that I was going to change their business with the technology. And, I'll never forget one of my old bosses said, Stace, we're a $70 billion company and you literally have 3 beakers and a dream. And it's going to be so fun to watch you take this on.
It's incredible. And you have products now that have already entered the market. One of the panel, the participants just asked the name of the company. It's Evrnu, Evrnu. Can you tell us about that, Stacy?
So we have not technically released product to retail yet. We did a B2B launch last year with Adidas and Stella McCartney. So we have prototypes out there, but we have not released to retail yet. We're waiting now that COVID has kind of taken place. We're waiting until things settle down and we have the consumer's attention to, launch the tech and talk to them about why it was made for them. And most importantly, how to start recycling their clothes.
Incredible. Well, those B2B partnerships are already quite exciting. Big names.
Yeah.
Michelle, can you tell us a little bit about Huue and your role? And then Louis, maybe you can, okay, thanks.
Yeah. We are a Oakland, Bay Area based company. I'm sitting in an apartment in San Francisco, so I apologize for the noise earlier, but happy to be able to share a little bit more now. So I guess for me, my story of being involved in fashion really, started as a kid. My family, as Kim kind of mentioned in the intro, my family owned their own apparel wholesale business out of LA as I was growing up. And so my kind of like earliest childhood memories were a combination of like me climbing on top of boxes and boxes of inventory in their warehouses, as well as traveling with my dad to China. And oftentimes, he'd have various business things he'd have to take care of, and we'd go and visit those factories, and I'd see the indigo in the air and in these denim production factories where he was working. So I had a lot of that firsthand exposure to the fashion industry. And yes, a lot of it happens in Asia and in China. So it's happened in all of our stories now. And I think because of that experience, actually, I didn't really think I was going to be involved in the fashion industry for, as I was growing up and going into college. I actively chose, Andras, to go with the wrong crowd in the business world. My parents are both engineers, and they would have much rather me kind of pursue that route. But I went off to kind of be a business generalist and learn as much as I can about the kind of world out there until the beginning of last year, when my friend and now co-founder Tammy, she had been finishing up her PhD program at UC Berkeley in the bioengineering department, and she had been developing this technology, working with using biotechnology to make more sustainable indigo dye. And it just felt like this calling to come back to the industry and sort of bridge my experience in sort of the business world with this opportunity and technology to change the fashion industry for the better. And I will say, because everybody asks. My dad was very skeptical about the whole thing when we began, and now he is a very proud papa and really excited about where we're going to go, even though we're very much at the beginning of our journey. And so I very much look up to, you know, Stacy and Andras and Louis for, you know, I think being in this journey for much longer than I, at least in the kind of like startup space. And I learn a lot every day.
My dad was skeptical too. Yeah.
My dad was a co-founder. That's how I co-opted him.
You were lucky. You were lucky.
Kim, I think you might be on mute.
Thank you, Louis.
Yeah.
Michelle, I also wanted to ask, are you pivoting into additional colors in the spectrum and as well as indigo, or are you really kind of focusing on those cooler colors?
Yeah, I guess I should mention, so our, you know, core technology, or I guess our base technology and our original name, Tinctorium, was really based on the kind of inspiration that the technology was based off the Japanese indigo plant that we mirror in, you know, the organisms that we program in order to produce this indigo dye. That being said, we, like Andras, I think, see the broader opportunity in the biofabrication kind of space and in biomaterials. And I think in when we think about just the landscape today of what dyes are available, you have kind of the natural, you know, natural plant-based dyes, and then you have the synthetic chemical dyes. Well, we think there's an opportunity, and both sides, you know, kind of have pros and cons, and we think that biotechnology presents this opportunity to create this more uncompromising solution for the dye space in general, and we absolutely, you know, have dreams about creating a whole palette of a more, you know, sustainable rainbow.
It's beautiful. And Louis, I can't wait to hear your story.
Sure. Thank you so much, Kim. First of all, I have two things to say. One is, when people talk about like, who are your heroes, who are the kinds of people that, you know, really inspire you, it's these people on this panel. You guys are amazing. And I just feel, I'm gonna get a little choked up, but Kim, thanks for pulling this together, because I think, you know, when I got into sustainability, it was a lot about the big luminaries, the big sort of faces at the podium, the people writing the big books about the movement. And we needed them because we needed to wake us all up. We needed that big high level inspiration. But we're 10, 15 years into this now in the textile space and built environment and other sectors. We're going 20, 25 years into the work. And it's moved to, like, I lovingly refer to us as the worker bees, because we are the ones that are out there, like, really diving in, and really you guys, because I'm just like a voice piece and an aggregator for what you guys are doing, which I'm happy to share more about. So first of all, I just want to like say that this is a really great list. And as I look at the attendees, I see some more of the amazing people in there that have been part of the story that we're all working on and building together. Secondly, I want a t-shirt that says 3 beakers in a dream, or was it 2 beakers in a dream? How many?
Three.
You had 3. Okay. 3 beakers in a dream. I think all of us on the panel would like to have that shirt. Of course, using all of our technologies, right, to produce that shirt. So I'm kind of an unlikely person to get into this sector as well, too. I think when I go back to my origin, that, you know, to getting into this work was really back in the corporate sponsorship philanthropy work that I was doing way back at the Atlanta Olympic Games in '96. I was working in the arts, and we were working alongside global partnerships with the Cultural Olympiad around looking at, you know, building corporate sponsorship. And I thought, this is really interesting. I'm going to go back and get an MBA in corporate sponsorship, which puts you into the CSR, corporate social responsibility and philanthropy world. Going back to the mid 90s, early 90s, it was a lot of like, you know, we want to reach a certain market, we want a certain brand image, we're going to write a check to an organization that helps us build that. And what I could see at that time was a real disconnect between some of the ways in which industries were actually contributing to the very problems they were writing checks to solve for on the back end. And I think, you know, just not to call out anyone in particular, but just to say cosmetic industry that was, you know, supporting breast cancer awareness and a lot of that, but it was actually the formulations and the chemistry that could have been contributing towards towards some of those health issues. And we saw that in fashion, and we saw that in a lot of different sectors. And I thought there's a real disconnect. You know, we need to kind of get that philanthropy brand piece kind of over to the side and really look at what responsibility kind of means. CSR wasn't even really a term, I don't think, then. And so really building into, you know, how do companies help align their businesses and their practices with doing good, doing well, et cetera. Now we talk about these things and it's like everywhere, right? So mission-based, purpose-driven companies, B Corp, you know, it's all, at least in the world we're all working in, this is the world that we're all working to accelerate. And so within that, my interest was really to work with companies. As I said, when I interviewed for business school, I want to help companies find their soul, which is a little presumptuous on my part. But I think I knew what I was thinking about, which is like, how can we integrate and align that, bring authenticity, you know, to the future, and knowing that with climate change, with water scarcity, with a lot of the risks that we're going to be facing our humanity and the planet, and we're all witnessing a lot of that right now. In the coming years and decades, it would be critical that companies start to be part of the solution and that they start to remodel themselves. So I'm currently running an organization called the Apparel Impact Institute, which I'm happy to talk about. Like I said, we sit at the intersection of bringing together all the industry, funding, and solutions and scaling, you know, defragmenting the multitude of initiatives out there and scale it. But I got into this fashion space through the Cradle to Cradle Institute. I was working for Cradle to Cradle Products Innovation Institute. We had been funded to look at the textile apparel sector, and we launched an initiative that we thought was really compelling around verifying products for safe and healthy circular systems. And I think I spoke to half of this panel in that role as well about, you know, how their technologies and innovations could be part of the solution for new innovative materials or processes that would be part of the future.
That's amazing. And you see a breadth of different types of technologies. Are there a couple that you can tell us about in
Sure. I mean,
in addition to the ones we have on today?
Yeah, I mean, I think that what gets really exciting is definitely new materials. We know this week we've been talking a lot at the Sustainable Apparel Coalition's full member meeting, which is happening right now, about this report that we're working on with World Resource Institute that we're previewing, which is on science-based targets related to climate. And we know that material substitutions and new material innovation is going to be a big part of the solution. And so I've come across, you know, so many interesting companies. And I think that one technology that I do find extremely interesting is the intersection of agro waste or agricultural byproduct. And so we can be looking at the intersections of industries and looking at how does this material, which may not be required within the process of here, become a nutrient for another system. It's that cradle to cradle training that I have that makes me think, let's start linking all these pieces together and looking at where we can connect the dots. And so I think we're going to start to see that there is no one winning maybe new material. It's a diversity of a breadth to replace some of the existing materials that have a negative impact and start to look at how to broaden it. And certainly represented on this panel are some of those. I also get really excited about the Internet of Things connected to fashion and circularity, and really looking at big data and transparency. So some of the technologies that are out there that are looking at how to aggregate the footprint of a product, of the life cycle of a product, and really putting in the hands not only of like the back ERP system, so we can start tracking from the corporate brand retail side, but then ultimately from a consumer, and then as it builds into shared economy, resell economy, and circular economy, that the future is going to look like keeping a lot of these materials at play. This is another thing we talked about through the C2C cradle to cradle model. And I get really excited about all the technologies around data transparency and how to best leverage data and connect platforms for making it super easy for me to walk up, take this, QR code it, and as geeky as I want to get on this product, I can get there. And I think that's what's kind of exciting to me.
That's wonderful. Thank you. And
Yeah.
Andras, Stacy, and Michelle, all three of you have really looked at the business viability of your respective industries, and how do you compete in a world that is otherwise been outsourced or commoditized in order to keep prices low. How have, if any of you want to take this, how have you been able to adapt your business to compete on the economics?
Yeah, Kim, I think that's the central question, right? So, at Modern Meadow, we're very much focused on leveraging the power of biology to make these new ingredients and materials that can have relevance across industries. And we're very much driven by the sustainability impact, but that happens only once brands and consumers can adopt your technology in a scalable way. And so it becomes a multidimensional problem. You need to solve for sustainability. You need to solve for performance, because you cannot deliver a better, sustainability solution, but impact or make, the performance inferior, right? So you need to make sure that from a performance standpoint, the consumer experience is a win. From a look and feel standpoint, the brand's experience a win. But equally important, the technology needs to be scalable, and it needs to be able to deliver greater value, or at a price point that can be accessible to brands and ultimately to the consumer. Otherwise, it's just a great story. It's a great kind of laboratory bench innovation, and it's not going to have impact at scale. And to be honest with you, this is a challenge that we had very early on as a company, because the technologies that we were in love with at the very beginning of our journey were super cool, like really state-of-the-art technologies, but it was not at all clear how that, those technologies could scale. The technologies that you use in a medical context cannot translate directly into materials that can work at a metric ton, multi-metric ton scale. And it's taken us an 8-year journey to be able to stay true to the mission and to the objectives that we're trying to optimize for. Performance meets sustainability, meets the tunability of the platform, meets scalability and accessible price point. And we've gone through a multi-generational evolution in our technology, and it is really only now, this year, it just so happens to be a year of just great tumult and COVID, that our technologies are operating at full commercial scale production. And that's a big deal for us, because it can finally allow us to partner with some of the world's most amazing brands, and to be that catalyst for change, and to show up on their products in a way that is accessible and scalable for consumers. So you nailed it. That is the crux of it.
That's incredible. Congratulations. And you've been one of the early pioneers in the industry. And it's been amazing before I got to know you to see how many times you pivoted to make it work. And it's really exciting.
To say evolved. We've had to
evolve.
We've been true to the mission. We've been true to the mission and to the why, but the how needs to evolve to better solve for it, right?
Evolved. And I guess, yeah, I used the wrong word there, but what I meant was you've continued to grow in so many different directions, staying true to your original mission. I think it's been an inspiration to many people that are behind you in the industry in sustainable fashion. Anyone, Michelle or Stacy, do you want to?
Sure.
comment?
Yeah. So the price conversation is always where things get a little tricky, and I've tuned my approach with major brands and retailers. You really have to meet brands and retailers where they are. But the business model in apparel it's kind of insanity. We go around the world trying to figure out how to make product inexpensively so we can throw it away. So next year I can figure out how to make it less expensive so we can throw it away. So, and I spent the first half of my career probably being one of the most proficient people in doing that, finding an expensive product and then finding it less expensive the following year. So when it comes to innovation, we really do have to think about innovation in different ways, and we have to get much more creative than how we've traditionally thought about products. So what we really want to do is retrain brands and retailers, retrain the industry that this disposable or single-use business model has a limit. And we're starting to see the limit. We're running out of countries in the world that we can go into to drive price down. So what are we going to do now? So looking at regenerative materials, where you can essentially say, okay, you may pay more on the product creation side, But if brands and retailers are creating products that deeply resonate with their consumers, they're improving their full margin sales. If full margin sales improve, everybody in the supply chain wins. It's when brands and retailers get into this markdown dollar, chasing markdown dollars game, which is how the industry currently survives. That piece is where technologies become really powerful. So if we say to them, okay, if you have a dog and you can't give it away, rather than pay to have it liquidated or pay to have it landfilled, we can take it and convert it back into products that will sell. So it really just fundamentally changes the way that brands and retailers can think about how they engage with their consumers and how they think through the product creation and the value that's embedded into those products.
That's really well said and powerful. I like the win-win-win approach, and how you're also raising the bar for others. It sounds like you're going to be saving them significant costs as well down the line, especially.
And I'll tell you, pre-COVID, a lot of the people I was talking to was like, Stace, I only care about price. Don't talk to me about anything other than low price. And once COVID hit, they were like, okay, now what is it you do again? Like, explain it again. So, COVID kind of helped see, I was like, oh, you have a DC full of products that you want us to liquidate. Great. Let's talk about how we're going to get a little bit more sophisticated in how we think about our materials and our material flows. And, I have to think that no designer on the planet designs with the intent to do harm. So the moment we give designers this new platform and a new tool to use, that, they'll start specifying the use of safer materials.
Yeah, that's wonderful to hear that there's been that silver lining with COVID and companies taking more responsibility. Michelle.
I wanted to jump in a little bit here from an sort of earlier stage perspectives. I think this is all, just really interesting. And I think the point that Stacy just made also highlights kind of the broader, revolution, I think, that's going on. And that is very much the reason we're having this conversation, not just that the technology is more and more available, but also that consumer appetites and then correspondingly brand appetites are more and more so there. And so for us as an early stage company, this is very much an opportunity to kind of, for lack of a better word, I would just take advantage of this need and appetite for change. And show kind of what technology can do. And so that's sort of been our approach in our early stage. We're not quite at the point where we are going to be, commercializing millions of garments quite yet, but we know that there's a lot of brand interest in understanding and exploring technology. And we think kind of the first step to getting your foot in the door and getting those relationships kind of established is let's make some demonstration products, kind of like those, the B2B market relationships that Stacy had pioneered. Let's make some of those products, show the world what we can do, get consumers really, really excited about it, so that then it sets us up with the right foundation to scale. We kind of know what's the vision around, what we're really working towards here. And hopefully that helps everybody kind of shape a different conversation and think about these materials in a different way rather than just comparing them with the traditional commodities.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Andras, I saw you nodding.
No, I fully agree. I mean, look, any new to the world, especially material technology, has to demonstrate performance, has to get to scale, has to get to a price point that is accessible. And those are all incredible hurdles, right? So, the expectation cannot be that day one, these technologies are going to achieve all of those things at the same time. I think the key has to be that you have to then be premium or offer a premium experience until you are cost comparable or eventually cheaper, right? But the trajectory has to be there. If you can be better, and if you can then get to an accessible price point, or ultimately, because of the efficiencies from sustainability, right, get to be even, advantageous, that is a game changer, right? And I think that's the trajectory that we're all on, right? Because to be honest with you, what Stacy is talking about, right? Making things to waste is not just bad from a sustainability standpoint. It should be bad from an economic standpoint.
And there should be embedded costs in that, even though we don't see them right now.
Exactly.
And Andras and Michelle, you both have the unique challenge of working with life forms in order to solve for your problem. Have there been any challenges with the biotechnologies being more complicated or unruly than you expected, or are these microorganisms performing as they should?
Maybe I can answer from kind of a basic level, and then Andras, you can talk through the longer journey. I think yes. That the simple answer is like, I think there's a lot of desire from this kind of synthetic biology space to say like this is basically biology as software. But I think all of us who are here kind of doing the industrial biotech thing are saying, but at the same time, biology is just not as predictable as software. And so that is the biggest challenge, is really that sometimes you don't know when breakthroughs are going to happen and how long they're going to take. And so you may know that theoretically it's possible, but I think that is probably, again, kind of comes down to the gap in terms of building those early relationships also with brands and stakeholders across the supply chain, is communicating and helping them to understand that this type of technology isn't going to happen necessarily in the same trajectory that they might traditionally have expected. And so to ask for a little bit of patience in that development journey. And I think we need to do our part to then educate them about why that is the case, so that we can kind of have that patience.
And showing those milestones over time, that you're really, showing them progress and looking for that kind of patient venture capital. But once you solve for it, I imagine that the upside potential is just incredible.
Exactly.
Yeah,
so
Andras,
same here,
yeah.
Right. I would say that we've gone very deep and wrestled with some incredible technologies. I mean, just to give a little bit of background, for many years now, we've developed a platform that can produce collagen and collagen-like proteins that don't derive from animals. And for those of you who are like science inclined, collagen is a very complex protein. It's one of the most important structural proteins in life, right? It's the most abundant protein in your body, the main protein in your skin. And it's really difficult to produce through synthetic biology. And more to the point, it's especially difficult to purify and recover. So there's a lot of emphasis in synthetic biology on, designing organisms to produce things through fermentation and talking about your rate titer and yield in the fermentation process. But there's as much brain damage, if not more, sometimes involved in the downstream processing to be able to purify and recover your molecule of interest. And that's something we've been wrestling with for many years. We've been scaling up our process to thousands of liters. We've built out a purification facility. We understand collagen at a more fundamental level than almost anybody in the world. And then we stumbled upon an insight that gave us, frankly, just allowed us to truly accelerate. And the insight was that we understood what it is about collagen in terms of its structure and function that works in our materials. We understand why it is that protein is so special. And then we asked ourselves the question, where else can we source that functionality? And then we started screening, hundreds of other proteins, plant-derived proteins, and we've actually found a very, very small subset that also works. And so now we think of our technology in a more broad way. We have recombinant ways of making proteins. We also have plant-derived ways of sourcing proteins. We can use, combination of these proteins to actually tune our materials and give us some functionality. The very first generation of our materials that are coming to market are very much collagen-like proteins, but they're plant-derived. And in the meantime, all of the collagen technology that we've developed also has tremendous markets, because collagen is in huge demand for a whole host of other verticals, right? But it allows us to think multi-generationally about our materials, and it also allows us to think in terms of multiple verticals for both our materials and the ingredients that we're able to produce.
I'm sure Louis gets to see all of these different types of technologies come through his platform, and also each of you will have a number of technologies in addition to your main business that you can pursue separately as separate verticals. I'm going to jump into the COVID's effect, and Louis, it would be really great if you could kind of highlight from a macro level some of what you've seen, both the positives and negatives for sustainable fashion.
Sure.
And Stacy commented a little bit on how there was a silver lining. If anyone else wants to chime in there, that would be great.
Yeah, thank you. Absolutely. Yeah, and I love that Andras was talking really about the multiple applications that can come out of a lot of the technologies, because I think that's when things get super interesting, is when we stop looking just within the sort of definition of our one space, because nature doesn't do that, right? So if we're looking at applying an approach of biomimicry, then we're really looking at how different solutions are going to be diversified across different applications, which is really exciting, and kind of links back into the point that I was making earlier about connecting different systems, different industries, and not only from a material stream, but also from just work efficiencies. I think so. Speaking of that topic, I think the COVID environment is a really interesting one for this industry, because clearly, those of us who are paying attention know that it's hit retail and it's hit brands in a way that it was already fragile. And what it has done is exposed how fragile and loosely held together the whole supply chain and the relationship between the brand retailers and suppliers has been, because the cancellation of orders or the quick shift in terms of demand or lack of demand has had a huge impact on facilities. So we do a lot of the work we do at Apparel Impact Institute is to scale programs within the supply chain. So like real energy efficiency and water and chemical efficiency programs that we've been rolling out, like the Clean by Design initiative that NRDC founded, and we've been scaling that and now looking at renewables and other areas. Well, if all of a sudden you're trying to use the cash that you have on hand to just keep some of your workforce in place and try to take care of your workers, and we've been getting these, emails from some of our partners in the supply chain saying, this is what my real day looks like. I have to choose whether this $5,000 is going to go into your efficiency program or whether I'm going to keep, helping to feed the families of these workers. And so it's a real trade-off on, what is most important. And clearly in this moment, taking care of humans and people is most critical. But then it starts to really realize that what we already knew all along is just how subject the supply chain is to the whims. And I know that's not a very complimentary way to put it. And Stacy, you and I could probably get into some real conversations around how this industry is set up around relationship to suppliers. But I think it can be a real one-sided from the price point perspective, but also just from, there's no long-term relationship and contracts really in place. I think that's going to shift. And we've been saying that before COVID. So one of the trends that I'm seeing is everything we were saying and working on before COVID is now even more important and meaningful in the COVID world. And we could apply that probably to everything that we're doing, because I think fortunately we, and I say we, like everybody working in sustainability, technology, working from home, like all these innovations were kind of in place, but now it's like, hey, we're not able to go into the facilities and run these programs. How are we going to do it digitally? How are we going to actually train for some of these efficiency programs from remotely? So it's a lot of leaning into some of the new innovation and technology that was already in place. What I'm also finding then is that the relationships that are being built between brand retailers and suppliers seems to, and I think we have to be cautious to make big, bold statements, but seems to be deepening in a way that preferred vendors and priority suppliers are going to be leaned into with a lot of this work. Where does that leave the rest of the industry and the supply chain? I think it's important to say, does that mean we're going to have a massive downsizing of supply chain? And what does that look like for worker livelihood and economic development? So it's a trade-offs. And then I'll say, in terms of the brands and manufacturers that we're working with, we're seeing a doubling down on the work. It's like what Stacy said about people are kind of going, this is more interesting to us now for a number of reasons. And I think whether that's because of values shift or whether that's because remaining relevant within sort of the next phase of what this industry is going to look like is on point. But we're seeing nobody disappearing from our work. We're seeing more of leaning in, but it has to be done in collective action because, as I said earlier, resources are diminishing. So doing this together, pooling resources and working as a collective, I think is going to be critical.
It's really well said. I think that's a good recap. And I think we're all hoping that some of these early positive signs are going to continue well after COVID. And maybe this could be the shift where responsible fashion, sustainable fashion is not only economical, but it's demanded across the board from consumers. So that's quite exciting. The time just flew by. I have about 20 more questions here. If the audience wants to write any questions in the chat, I'll be happy to shift to those. In the meantime, if there's a couple others, I'll keep going with. One thing that I'm quite interested in is the metrics that you're starting to judge your sustainability by, if any. And Louis, I'm sure that you're very involved in kind of setting the standards for how do you measure impact, how do you measure sustainability. It's probably different for each company. Stacy, I can imagine you mentioned that some of the savings in water, for example, that's quantifiable. What's quantifiable, what's not? How are you going to convey the impact that you have to customers and shareholders?
Yeah, it's a really, really good question. And we're very much kind of sharpening up the metrics in our company at the moment. We have a philosophy that we've articulated and pillars in our sustainability strategy. For us, we very much are motivated by urgent climate action. That's one of our main pillars. Second pillar is maintaining a balanced ecosystem. So it's all well and good to want to, diminish greenhouse gas emissions and to move away from fossil fuel inputs. That's the first pillar. But if you do that with irresponsible use of land, water, eutrophication, not great, right? So you got to do that while minimizing your use of land, your use of water, and the eutrophication impact. So we're mindful of maintaining a balanced ecosystem. And finally, designing for circularity and responsible end of life. So our design philosophy in our materials is, our materials are bio-based. And so we design our materials to have a biodegradable end of life. But it's tricky because you also want to design your materials to be durable, right? To last long in the application, but then when it's done in its use, right, it can ultimately biodegrade. So those are the pillars in our philosophy. I would say, as with all things, there's certain things that are going to be, more important and more urgent for us to quantify. And for me personally, I'm extremely motivated by climate impact, which is why the goal in our materials and the philosophy in designing materials is for our materials to be climate positive materials. We want to make sure that we design our materials to have a much better greenhouse gas emissions profile versus traditional leather and synthetic leather. And to the best of our calculations so far, our materials have, high 80s, 90%, better GHG, greenhouse gas emissions profile versus traditional leather, and 20 to 50% better than synthetic leather. Now we need to get that at scale. And then the metric I'd love to be able to boast about, right, or point to with pride in 5 to 10 years is the amount of metric tons of CO2 equivalent that we've displaced from the market. That's the main metric I really hope to point to, but making sure that the other metrics are in balance as well.
Yeah, agreed. We look at impact to global air, water, soil, and trees, the meta level impact to natural resources. But where we find the biggest impact reduction on our side is by preventing resources from entering landfills, because, the whole concept of sending things to landfill is, when is responsibility going to take place? Is it going to be 1,000 years or is it going to be today? So that's really the conversation around landfilling versus incineration. At what point do you take responsibility? If we can avoid those two effects entirely, we can really start to move the needle on impact reduction. So for us, it's not enough to just take waste and leverage it into a new raw material. It's, how are we taking those materials back and preventing them from entering waste streams or incineration.
And showing others how to do it too, right? Through your B2B or your licensing models.
Yeah. And there's also a need for infrastructure, and this is one thing that we know we're going to have to invest in is, how do we track on a polymer level where the polymer is actually going and when the polymer gets checked back in, so that we actually have visibility to what happens to it. Where does it go?
That's kind of what Lewis was talking about, right? With you can track the subtleties all the way through, where it comes from and where it's going.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And the way we're looking at impact is really around measuring it against industry targets. And so, we're think of us like a impact investment fund, but instead of return on I investment, we're return on I impact. So like dollar in, unit of carbon out, dollar in, unit of water out, chemical savings, et cetera. So that's how working with any one of these guys or any of the projects that we're scaling, we give reports at the end that say this facility saved X amount. And it's, not always the sexiest thing for people to like, but it's actually the most meaningful is to be able to deliver a report and says, we put this amount of funding into scaling this project. This is the input. Now multiply that times the volume in the supply chain, and that's how we're going to reach our goals. And so we're very much held accountable to helping brands and retailers and manufacturers leverage the tools they're using through the Sustainable Apparel Coalition, like the Hague Index, the MSI. They just launched their product module today, which is very exciting. And so as all of this data that you guys are collecting on the panel starts to come in and help complement and rebuild that as out to be more robust, then we would be the ones to help drive that impact too.
Yeah. And I just want to say, I think, organizations like Lewis's are so important and helpful for us, especially in the early stage, just to kind of understand all of these things. But I think there's just a lot more work to be done by the industry. So our primary target is really around the chemical savings and chemical toxicity. We know that, almost 20% of industrial water pollution is due to textile dyeing. And a lot of these textile dyes contain lots of toxic chemicals and require additional chemicals in the application process. And so with Huue, really the idea is not only kind of eliminating the fossil fuel source, but also eliminating the need for all of those toxic chemicals in the production and application process of the dyes. But I think one of the key challenges that we find is actually also that it feels like the industry is really behind on understanding chemical toxicity at all. And so, and a lot of that, we can get into it, but I think, comes from it being suppliers of suppliers, and, how do you track that? How do you get that kind of level of accountability? And so we want to not just kind of track it so that we're keeping ourselves accountable, but also tracking it to help build a system for the future so that the entire industry can get smarter on these types of metrics as well.
That's really well said. Do you think collectively that there will be a tag on each textile in the future, or some sort of matrix by which all of the fabrics of the future will be compared, almost like when you go onto Amazon and it says recommended products and you can compare the different specifications, where it sounds like mostly the elimination of factors is most important, right? Elimination of GHGs, elimination of the carbon imprint, less use of chemicals, less water, right? Less inputs altogether. So do you think we'll see that at some point? Is that what you're working on, Lewis?
It's already happening.
Developed. Yeah.
Awesome.
I think
awesome. Any good resources?
I think to Lewis's point, it's likely to be a QR code or NFC or something like that allows you to just open, to experience the product, not just physically, but also digitally, right? Yeah. And with the IoT type solutions, you can now see a lot more information about the product, how it's made, the composition of its materials, the environmental impact of its materials, but also from a kind of a consumer experience enhancing standpoint, it might open also a gateway to new experiences with the product and community with the product, right? So it doesn't all need to
new
be
stories.
Exactly. It doesn't
All
all need
the
to be
people that help
vegetables.
along the way.
You can even push a button to recycle it.
There you go.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, this is so exciting. We're up on time, but I just want to say thank you all so much for participating. It really means a lot to me. It means a lot to the people who are watching. All of you are pioneers in your work, and hopefully collectively we can, really expand the footprint of sustainable fashion. Thank you, Simran and Canopy, for allowing us to co-host this panel with you.
Yeah, and thank you, everybody. This was so fascinating. I love learning about this. And Kim and I have a few more panels that we're going to be putting together. I think we're still working on what the next one's going to be. I think maybe the future of garbage. Is that the one that we're doing next? No, we've done that one.
I would have to check.
Yeah, we have to check, but we have a couple more coming up. But yes, thank you everybody and everyone that is in the audience. Thank you for watching. And this is also up on YouTube, it's on Facebook, and people will be able to go watch it after. All right, thanks everybody.
And also Andras and I will be co-hosting a Future of Food and Ag panel in a couple of weeks. We'll have more information, and you're all welcome, to hopefully attend. We'll have more details, probably both of us, on our social media.
Oh,
thank you again.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all for joining.
Thank
you.
Okay.